Okay, this is the final stage of exercise 8.2 where you're actually getting to your final result. And we're going to now take the roster that we derived and we're going to send that to polygon format. Now before I called mine ST, or suitability test, and I believe the book is calling this time to call your shapefile when you go to polygon format a suitability test. So we're going to keep it basically the same name in my case here. So I'm going to roster to polygon. This is under conversion tools. So if I click on roster to polygon, then my input roster is going to be my 0 and 1 result, Boolean result. And my field value, of course, is going to be value. And I'm going to send it to default geodatabase, and I'm going to call this as the book wants it, which is, I'm just going to call it suit test. And I am not going to simplify polygons. I want to keep the actual shape of my Boolean result. So do not simplify polygons, and we'll go ahead and say OK. This takes a moment or so to convert, and we can see that I'm about 50%. I'm just going to pause the video for a second. Okay, so it processed fine, and you've noticed I've cleaned up my table of contents here, so I basically just have three things. I'm going to get rid of the roster format, so I'm going to remove that. Now I have a polygon format of my results, so let's take a look at that. We're going to open the attribute table, and what's important here is that we have a grid code of zeros and ones, and I don't want the stuff that's 0. I want the area that corresponds with the correct slope and road market access, which we term in the grid code as a 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select by attributes for my grid code. So I'm going to go to select by attributes, and I'm going to be in suitability test or suit test. My grid code is going to equal, I can click on get unique values and drop it in that way. We can see we have a lot of features. So I'm going to go ahead and say 1 and say apply OK. It'll take a second for it to process. Now once I'm selected, now here's what I want to export out, and the book is going to call this export suitable areas. So let's go ahead and say OK. We've done that, and we're going to call it suit area. So I'm going to export out. I'm going to send this to the default geodatabase. I think the book has you going out to a folder. You can do that if you want to. I think it should work out okay. So I'm going to call this suit areas. Okay, and say save it. And it looks like I have a few features off from what the book calls for. I have, it looks like about, let's open this up. So if I go to my attribute table, I have 139691, and I think the book has a few more or a few less. I might want to go back and check my processing to make sure I got everything right, but that's the result that I got. I think it's pretty close to the book. So I'm just going to go ahead and proceed here. So what we have now is we're going to get rid of suit test, and what I have as a result here is just those areas that are suitable at this point in time, regardless of their size or capacity. And of course, if we think about it, we're going to need to find those contiguous areas that we could place a camp. And they need to be of a certain size, and the book has a size that they suggest would be the best. So let's go ahead and work on that criteria now. So if we open up the attribute table, what we're going to want to do if we don't have area already is we want to figure out what is area. So we can get rid of grid code because we know it's 1. So I'm just going to delete that out. We don't need that anymore. And I'm going to make a new column now for area. And we did this with the assignment for Kosovo where we added a field. In this case, we'll have it be a long integer. And I'm just going to call it area and say OK. And then here, I'm going to go to area and I'm going to calculate the geometry. It's going to be an area calculation. It's going to be in square meters. Okay. Now I can create this because I'm in a UTM zone 36 which is a projected system with meters essentially. So I can actually do this calculation. So I can go ahead and say OK. And what it's going to do is going to create the area for each one of my separate polygons in my shapefile here. And then once we do that, then we need to calculate the capacity. So even though the area, we know what it is, and we can have a relative sense of, here's probably the size that I want. I might want it between this area and that area. But what we really want to know is the capacity. So the book says they're willing to consider 45 square meters per person as the capacity mark. So let's go ahead and add a field, and we're going to call this capacity. And this will be a long integer too, and we'll say yes. Now here we're going to use the field calculator to say area divided by 45. That will give us our capacity, and we'll say OK. So this will take a second to run. Once it runs, we're going to have some that are have really teeny tiny little capacities that are not really worth developing a site for. And the book suggests between 10 to 20,000 is probably a really good size for capacity for siting within the district. So we can continue along for all of the districts, but we really just want to do the final mapping in Gulu. So let's go ahead and do a clip before we do our final capacity selection. So if I go to districts, and let's zoom to districts here, we can see that we have a lot of districts, and we have a huge shapefile result, and we want to clip this down. So what we want to do is, let's go ahead to districts, and we're going to do a select by attributes. So I need to be in my districts, and the name needs to be Gulu. So I'm going to type in Gulu here, and it brings me to the correct name. I'm going to say apply it, OK, and it's going to make that selection active. So once that selection is active, now I can do a clip with that active selection, and it will clip my suit areas right to the edge there. So let's go ahead now to go geoprocessing, and we are going to clip this feature. So the input feature is going to be suit areas, and the clipping is going to be districts with the selection on. And I'm going to just call this, I'm not sure what the book calls it, I'm just going to call this final suit. And I'll say OK. And this is going to be something that's a little easier to work with now. So that's complete. I'm going to close the window here, and I have this final suitability. Let's get rid of our full file and then take a look at what we have here. Okay, that's great. So these are all the possible results that we could have at this point in time for Gulu. But what I want to do even further is I want to get that capacity figured out between 10 and 20,000. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll go to select by attributes, and here we're going to put in our equation, not for districts, but for final suit. And I'm going to say that capacity, well, first let me set up my equation. So I'm going to put in my brackets. It's going to be one thing, and then I'm going to say and another expression. So now I'm going to be back in my brackets. I'm going to say capacity. This is a little hard to get in there. Okay, now capacity is going to be greater than or equal to 10,000. 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. And let's get inside capacity bracket. Say capacity is going to be less than or equal to 20,000. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we'll go ahead and apply this. Okay, that looks like this correct selection, and we'll say OK. Now those are my features that I would actually make my final map with. Okay, so those are going to be a sub-select of my full feature set. Let's see how many we have. So if we go to Final Suit and open the attribute table, I see that I have 133 out of 3257. You may have a slightly different number. I'm not 100% sure that I got the exact results that the book got in terms of contiguous polygons. I probably want to go back and check it, but it should be something like this, and it should look very much like this. So in the southwest corner, there is a lot of suitability. In the middle eastern section, there's a couple potential spots there, and then in the southeast, there's also a little cluster, and that's basically it. So let's go ahead and export this out. I'm going to call it, instead of final suit, I should have had that be the final suitability. So I'm just going to call this, FS and send it to default geodatabase. That's my final suitability. And I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to get rid of this guy. And for districts, I actually want to export that out as Gulu because that's going to be something that I would want to use for my map making. So I'm going to call this Gulu and say save and say OK, say yes. And now I'm going to go ahead and develop this map a little bit here. So I'm still in data view. I'm going to stay in data view for the next steps. But at this point in time, what you can do is you can go ahead and symbolize now your polygon features. So if I went to quantities and my value here would be capacity, I could go ahead and develop this way. So we can see that the ones that are closest to 20,000 are in red. The lower capacities towards 10,000 are in yellow. Personally, I think that this is not the best way to do it. What I would suggest is doing one final transition if you want to. It's going to give you a little bit more flexibility and a little bit cleaner map. What you can do here is you can take your polygon to a point. So we would say make a conversion under Arc Toolbox, and we would go, let's see, we need to go, where's it going to be? Let me think about it for just a second. I'll come right back. Okay, under Data Management Tools, if we click on Features, we can send a polygon to a point, so a feature to a point. Let's do that. So we go Input Features. In this case, I want what I'm calling FS, Final Suitability. And I'm going to send it to default geodatabase, and I'm going to I'll just call it what it is, and say OK. And then I have points. And once I have points, I have all the data that I originally had in the points. So I have the capacity number in the points. And now I can do things like proportional symbolization. So if I go to Properties, I could say quantities and then maybe proportional symbols. So if the value here is going to be capacity, maybe I make my minimum value 5, and let's see how this looks. That's kind of headed in the right direction. Let's try going to Properties and do graduated symbols. So let's put the capacity here. That's a little bit more dramatic, and I would say Apply. So there's a lot more I could do with my vector points features in terms of symbolization. Take a look at some of the maps that have been produced as map examples and spend some time with doing a really nice final suitability and developing a nice final map. And if you want to, it's perfectly fine to stay in this polygon format where you have these little squigglies, because that, in a way, that's the actual shape of the final suitability. So if somebody was actually to develop a site, they may want to have one shape over another shape. Some of these are a little bit odd in terms of a potential site. So maybe that's useful. I personally think just having a point with some type of symbolization on it in terms of capacities, a little bit cleaner approach for this map.